with the case for a national registration system with each person from birth issued with a unique number. By the 1990s, the Electoral Advisory Committee, EAC, made a recommendation for the establishment of a body to implement a national registration system, and as such, Cabinet approved the establishment of a national registration unit in the Ministry of Health in 1993, leading to the tabling of a national registration bill in 1995, which was later presented to Parliament in the year 2000. In July 2011, approval was given for the National Registration Unit to be transferred from the Ministry of Health to the Office of the Prime Minister. Then, in September 2011, the GOJ received a US $670,000 grant from the Inter-American Development Bank to commence the preparatory work required for the implementation of NIDS. The NIDS project was officially launched at the Jamaica House on September 27, 2011. By December of that same year, Cabinet approved the development of a NIDS policy. This was followed by the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between eGov Jamaica Limited and the Government of Jamaica to provide technical support in the management of the ICT consultancy required to design the NIDS architecture. In November 2016, the NIDS White Paper was tabled in Parliament, and by June 2017, Prime Minister Andrew Holness opened the debate on the National Identification and Registration Bill in Parliament, which was eventually passed in November 2017 by the Houses of Parliament. A Technical and Security Committee was established by the Office of the Prime Minister to design and develop the requirements for a new electronic and digital identification system. Also in that same year, the Office of the Prime Minister initiated an international competitive bidding process to identify a consortium of international and local experts to supply the National Identification System solution. That process lasted 2 years and concluded in 2019 when a contract was awarded to the PBS consortium made up of Entrust Data Card, PBS Jamaica, Group of Vision, and Thales Group to supply the National Identification System solution. In February 2018, the government of Jamaica signed a loan agreement with the IDB for US $68 million for the NIDS and other projects. However, the act would hit a snag in 2019 when the Supreme Court ruled that the National Identification and Registration Act of 2017 was null and void and of no legal effect. Committed to realizing the vision of the NIDS, the government recalibrated its approach with the designing of a new NIDS policy, which led to the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, tabling a new National Identification and Registration Act 2020 in December 2020, which made provisions for a voluntary NIDS.
I table a bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2020.
Committed to an inclusive effort, a joint select committee comprising both political parties to review the new NIDS bill was formed. The first sitting of the committee started on January 5, 2021, and various groups, organizations, and individuals were allowed to make submissions to the committee. On Tuesday, July 6, 2021, Honorable Delroy Chuck laid on the table of the House of Representatives the report of the Joint Select Committee.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Joint Select Committee on its deliberations on a bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2020.
The House of Representatives on Tuesday, July 20th, approved the report of the Joint Select Committee.
The question before the House is that the report be now approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
The legislation made provisions for a voluntary and secure national identification system for Jamaica, and a bill entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2021 was tabled.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2021.
Later that year, on September 21, 2021, the House of Representatives began debating on the NIDS, which was eventually passed in the House of Representatives on October 13, 2021, and by the Senate on November 19, 2021.
I am honored to rise once more today, this time to open the debate on the National Identification and Registration Act 2021.
So for the most part, the opposition is supportive of the NIDS bill.
A bill entitled An Act to Provide for a National Identification and Registration Authority for a National Identification System and for Connected Matters read a third time and passed.
NIDS was now back on track, and by January 4th, 2022, Prime Minister the Most Honorable Andrew Holness toured the NIDS Card Production Center in Kingston. This was followed up with the contract signing between Fujitsu Limited and the Government of Jamaica on May 6, 2022 to facilitate the digitization of records processed at the RGD. No sooner Jamaicans were introduced to the design of the National ID card in the House of Representatives on May 24, 2022. The government on June 3, 2022 signed a Memorandum of Understanding with deposit-taking institutions to participate in the pilot of the National Identification System, NIDS. Today, the government of Jamaica is proud to launch the technical pilot for the National Identification System NIDS, a simple, safe and secure way to verify one's identity. One ID, many opportunities.
Over 100 homes delivered across 14 parishes. Your government, under the new social housing program, is making home ownership possible for those who didn't even dare to dream. Over the next 3 years, we will be building 1,500 homes just for our vulnerable citizens. Without a doubt, all citizens, irrespective of economic status, deserve a good home. Your government cares.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Your government is working for you. On the East Coast, there's the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project. The highway, which began in January 2017, is now slated to end in March 2025. Another segment under the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project is the Maypen to Williams Field, which is approximately 81% complete. Next stop, the Morant Bay Urban Center. Preparation and demolition exercises began in July 2022 at the Goodyear factory in the parish where the center is being constructed. Construction phase has already started. Third stop, over in Portmore. Plans are afoot to make the Sunshine City the 15th parish. With the parish status comes the Portmore Resilience Park, which ground will be broken by year-end 2022. For in the west, we have the Montego Bay Perimeter Road, starting from Iron Shore to Bogue, from Montego Bay down to Montpelier. More updates to come as we reignite our nation for greatness.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
I encourage the deaf children to have deaf pride, to know that they can. You're on the same level as a hearing person. It doesn't matter that you can't hear. You have a lot of deaf adults who are successful, and you can achieve. You can get the education that you want, you can do anything that you want, you can achieve. Don't feel like you can't because you're deaf.
In believing that nothing is impossible, I have been able to culture a very positive attitude to life, and that positive attitude has worked for me, and I am confident it will work for others. I would want to say to persons with vision impairment and disabilities that it is critical that they become tooled or retooled with the appropriate technologies that can help to drive the way forward so that they can accomplish their vision and their goals.
Children with disabilities, whether you have CP or not, I strongly believe that you have a purpose. My disability has taught me that when it says the sky is the limit, it is. There are times when you're going to fall, but what is to stop you from rising?
Chief of Defense Staff, Major General Anthony Anderson, Commissioner of Police, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, Minister of National Security, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness. Also, we have in the audience the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malawu Fort, as well as the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Ms. Audrey Sewell, and the Attorney General is also here. We will not be long, so without further ado, I will ask the Prime Minister to come and make his presentation. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone listening overseas on social media and all other platforms. Compliments of the season. This morning at midnight, His Excellency, the Governor-General, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, declared 2 states of public emergency. One in the entire parishes of St. Anne, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, and St. Andrew. And the second, this is now in the entire parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover. The government, after careful consideration and on the advice of the security chiefs, decided to notify the Governor-General that it was necessary and indeed appropriate to declare states of public emergency in the areas so described above. While we have had reasonable success in controlling the number of murders leading up to and during the Christmas season, the threat levels for ongoing gang conflicts, contract killings, organized robberies of businesses, hijacking of goods in transit, and various confidence scams that lead ultimately to the loss of life, spreading of fear, and depriving entire communities of their freedom to pursue their business and happiness. That threat level remains elevated and extensive in scale. As I indicated upon the declaration of the last state of public emergency, we are in the festive season, and this requires the deployment of even greater resources. And therefore, the government has to maximize and use all lawful means to multiply and project its security resources, not only to investigate and interdict after the occurrence of the crime or loss of life, but to increase presence, to deter criminals, and to conduct various operations to preempt them. The proof of the effectiveness of these measures is in the immediate reduction in murders and its follow-on lag effect in periods going forward. The Commissioner, of course, will give details and statistics on the effect of the measures. However, I invite you to consider that last year, December, there were 127 murders committed in Jamaica. Yes, in December. If we were to annualize this, that would mean a murder rate of 56 per 100,000. That is unacceptable in any country, by any standard, by any means. So after studying the situation carefully and being seized of the data and intelligence which showed a similar trend this year, the government acted reasonably and decisively to save lives and to preserve the freedoms of ordinary citizens. The government will continue to be relentless in our efforts to control murder specifically and crimes generally. We will continue to use all measures available to us. We will use the SOEs when necessary. Criminals and criminal masterminds should take no comfort that the time for declaration is short. We are and we will continue to use all lawful powers within our means to control crime and to save lives. We continue to work on the legislative agenda, which will increase our powers and show our seriousness as a society to address crime. We continue to work on the Enhanced Security Measures Bill. We have already declared our intention to increase the penalty for murder. More and more, my inclination is to go higher with the penalty. And already in Parliament, there is a new Bail Act. Other measures to come, including changes to the Fingerprint Act and other legislative measures. We are serious about showing the criminals that we are in charge of this country and they are not at will to take lives. The duty of any government is to save lives. And I am confident in the view that our measures in this season have resulted in many Jamaicans being safer and many more lives saved. I now invite the Commissioner to give his presentation.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And we just recognize other ministers and officials and also members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Since the beginning of this year, the country has recorded a daily average of 4 murders. This peaked in September, where the daily average reached nearly 5 murders. September and October recorded increases as high as 8% when compared to 2021. Over the past 2 months, we have managed to reduce the daily murder average to 2.5 and have reduced the gap between last year and this year from 8% above in early October to 1.5% currently. This has been achieved through a suite of legislative, operational, and intelligence responses. The key legislative tools were the provision of emergency powers to the security forces for 2 14-day periods during November and December, and the new Firearms Act coming into effect at the beginning of November. The use of states of public emergency has once again proven to be the quickest and most effective way of rapidly reducing violent crime. During the first period of the SOEs declared in November, murders were reduced by as high as 64% and increased by as much as 171% during the 7-day period when the emergency powers were removed. When the powers were reinstituted, the first 7-day period once again recorded declines as high as 55% in the divisions where the SOEs were declared and continued to trend downwards. With the Firearms Act, from November the 1st to December the 20th, we charged 70 persons under the new act, 63 men and 7 women, the majority in the 16 to 30 age group. I look forward to the impact that the new sentencing provisions will have. On the operational side, Operation Relentless 2, a jointly planned and executed operation with the JDF and the police, was launched in September, which by October started to stabilize the increase we were experiencing. With the provisions under the Emergency Powers Act, the operation became that much more effective, resulting in immediate reductions. The police divisional crime response plans were reviewed and adjusted where required, and key divisions benefited from additional resources. Our aggressive recruiting and training process allowed us to graduate over 600 new officers over this last quarter. We were also able to assign additional mobility assets, including quick response bikes, to key areas. Our intelligence capability has allowed us to interrupt literally hundreds of murders and has led to increased confrontations with gunmen. We have intercepted criminals who are in the illegal firearm ecosystem, leading to the highest level of gun recovery in 5 years. Along with our partner agencies and overseas partners, we have been targeting the organized criminal networks, their assets and their safe spaces. This will increase into 2023 as we up the ante for those who have chosen to destroy the country for their own selfish ends. Our intelligence has indicated that there are those criminals who are seeking to use the cover of the festivities over this period to mask their movements, carry out their shootings, and intimidate communities and commercial interests. This is unacceptable, and to prevent it, we will need to optimize available resources and act on intelligence to separate those violent gunmen from the communities and those that they wish to harm. We must continue our downward trend in murders. Operation Relentless 2 will continue in the various divisions, with those declared having the additional powers under the Emergency Powers Act. We'll continue to pursue and interdict those who seek to hide themselves away from their traditional spaces. And we ask that every well-thinking and well-meaning Jamaican comes on board with us to support the effort of our security forces. As we close this year and move into the new year, it is critical that we sustain the downward trend, using all the tools that we know are effective in curbing the violence we continue to see. Therefore, in consultation with the CDS, we requested the use of emergency powers under a limited state of public emergency in the divisions that were previously mentioned and parishes. The addition of St. Andrew North will now bring all divisions in the corporate area under an SOE, allowing for greater coordination of assets as the violence producers are targeted, particularly in volatile spaces and at the divisional borders. Intelligence is indicating the movement of gangsters and illegal guns through and in the St. Andrew North Division, as well as attempts by migrant criminals to align and establish themselves in some hotspots in the division. This cannot be left unaddressed if we are to continue to reap the successes that we have been seeing, particularly across Kingston and St. Andrew. As we prepare for the end of the year and the many events and commercial activities that are a feature of the period, I ask the public to continue to obey the rules and laws associated with public order, loud noise, and traversing the roadways. They are there for your safety, and whereas we are out in our numbers for this period, it is not possible to be everywhere. We ask you to take responsibility for your personal safety on the roads and at these events, while we maintain the operational activities associated with targeting of violence producers and criminal gangs, as well as violence reduction in hotspots. We'll continue to forge ahead relentlessly against gangs and gunmen. We'll continue to reduce opportunities for guns to be trafficked and used to kill people as we seize illegal guns and prosecute under the new Firearms Act. To get the results we have gotten in this last quarter, it has taken significant sacrifice and effort by my police officers, the JDF, and other partners. We have been pushing relentlessly throughout the last quarter of the year, and I'll use this platform to thank all of my members and those members of the JDF and other partners that have supported us for their unwavering commitment to the safety of the people of Jamaica and their steadfastness and persistence under difficult circumstances. I've interacted with many of them during my visits over the last couple of weeks, and their passion to serve has never been more evident. Let me reassure the public that as we disrupt the activities of criminals and gangsters, we will try to minimize disruptions for persons going about their normal and lawful activities as we collectively respond to the violence in these areas so declared. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will now have a presentation from the Chief of Defense Staff, Rear Admiral Antoinette Weems Gorman.
Thank you, Minister. Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, other government ministers and officials, members of the press, citizens of Jamaica, good morning. The Jamaica Defence Force continues to support the recommendation for the declaration of a state of public emergency. The new declaration covers the entire areas of the parishes previously mentioned, notably the addition of the Police Division of St. Andrew North. Over the past 2 states of public emergencies, the Jamaica Defense Force has been able to increase its support to the JCF in this effort to secure our nation. On the ground, you're seeing greater deployments of the land forces in support of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, with over 2,000 deployments in support of this effort. The land is but one domain in which our presence has been increased. Through our Maritime Air and Cyber Command, the active deployment of the JDF Coast Guard and the JDF Air Wing assets have also increased. In fact, this increase resulted in an interception of illegal fishing vessels, or one illegal fishing vessel with 131 Hondurans, and it is known that these fishing vessels also traffic weapons and ammunition into our spaces. We also just 2 days ago intercepted over 1,000 pounds of cocaine recovered through the coordinated efforts of our Maritime Air and Cyber Command. These operations in particular saw our maritime forces facing danger from men determined to traffic weapons and ammunition into our island to support additional criminal activities. If you are a Jamaican who wants to see your children grow up in a safe and secure country, then do your part. Share information and fully participate in your own security so that we can curtail the violence in our nation. Crime affects all Jamaicans, directly or indirectly. Therefore, we must play our part in the fight. You can do so by using the JDF tip line at 876-837-8888 or the JCF tip line at 311. In closing, let me reaffirm that the JDF is committed in its support to the JCF in securing and safeguarding Jamaica and Jamaicans. Thank you.
Thank you, Rear Admiral. We'll now have the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, Minister of National Security, who will make a presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, colleague ministers, Chief Commissioner of Police, Chief of Staff, members of the media, Jamaican listening. This government continues to pursue a comprehensive and strategic approach to combating crime and violence in the country. The states of public emergency protect law-abiding citizens from marauding criminals. Protecting the lives of Jamaicans is the ultimate responsibility of the executive, and we will continue to do what is necessary to protect the lives of our citizens. The Charter of Fundamental Rights was designed by the government then to prevent abuse, not to prevent SOE. In fact, the regulations have been reconfigured to ensure that law-abiding citizens are protected and the lawless are restricted. The Charter of Rights was never designed to stop the use of public emergencies, state of public emergencies. It was designed to prevent abuse by any government. It is indeed awesome powers, and that is why it is necessary to protect law-abiding citizens from the risk threat posed by criminals. As we pursue our policy and legislative changes that are required to support the work of security forces, we will utilize all the resources available to protect law-abiding citizens. Our use of the state of public emergency as a protective shield of the people is designed to protect the law-abiding citizens, restrict the lawless, and ensure that citizens over the festive season could enjoy a good time. I think all Jamaicans would accept we had a good Christmas. Law-abiding citizens can rest assured that the net fishing practice of times past no longer applies to today's security operations. All the required measures have been put in place to prevent the violation of human rights, while targeting, apprehending, and removing violence producers from the communities. Our officers are trained professionals and rely on quality intelligence to carry out their operations. These states of public emergency are restoring a sense of normalcy for law-abiding citizens so that they too can exercise their fundamental rights and enjoy it. The government's commitment is to protect the lives of all law-abiding citizens. The state of public emergency is a proven, effective tool for protecting Jamaican lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. We will now open the floor for questions from members of the media. Please identify your name and your media house. We will allow one question plus a follow-up. A member of the team will come to you with a microphone.
Remember, it's Christmas.
Yes, so we're not going to be here too long.
Good morning. I'm Roxroy McLean from the Jamaica Star.
Thanks, Roxroy.
My question is for the PM. We've had multiple SOE declarations since the start of the year, yet still we have close to 1,500 murders. Mr. PM, why do you think that the SOEs can still work?
Thank you. PM.
I don't know if the graphs can be displayed again. Particularly the graph showing the reduction in the average number of murders. And this is a graph showing the imposition of the SOEs, the 2 SOEs so far. Recall we had imposed one in St. Catherine in Spanish Town when there was a flare-up for 14 days. And that curtailed the situation there. We're not referring to those statistics, but to the immediate ones. Now, if you cast your eyes to the screen, and for those who are watching, you will see a bar chart, a bar graph, a stacked bar graph displayed. From November 1 to 14, it shows you that there were approximately 30 murders. So that would be the period immediately before the imposition of the SOE. Now look at the period of the imposition of the SOE, which is November 15 to 28. And I would say that's commissioned about 16 murders. I don't want to guess, it's not showing the specifics, but clearly, you could say it has cut the murders dramatically, almost in half. Isn't that proof enough? I find the question to be moot, to be baseless. The states of public emergency are an immediate tool that works to cut murders. They work every time that they are implemented. Why? Why do they work? There's no mystery. There is no advanced science. It is not metaphysics. It is simple. The people who are pulling the trigger, who are the murderers, we have intelligence on them. And we have, based upon the powers given in our Constitution, in the declaration of the use of these emergency powers, the ability to separate them from their communities and interrupt their cycle of life-taking. That's one. Secondly, the SOEs give the security forces more options in the deployment of security resources. It brings on board the JDF with powers of policing. It allows for independent operations in the policing space with the JDF and the JCF, though they are largely coordinated. And that acts as a force multiplier. So particularly in this period, the JCF would have been able to conduct its public order duties far more effectively, knowing that the JCF was there also conducting its strategic operations to support security, oftentimes independent, bearing in mind that the two organizations operate on a different rhythm, as they call it. So it's important that they have, especially in the policing space, a certain level of independence. The third point about the SOE is its targeted use. There are many concerns about wanton abuse and deprivation of the rights of citizens generally. That is not the case. We have used these powers in very targeted ways. And we have, as we have used them over the years, we have developed better understanding, better systems. And so we are of the view that whatever concerns there may be about the perfection of its use, that we are getting close and closer to having the SOEs being a refined tool. So the SOEs, without question, and we keep getting it, does it work? The SOEs work. As I said before, my friend, 127 murders were committed in December last year. In December, when we should all be reflecting on the birth of Jesus Christ and looking for peace and being with our families. 127 murders. If you were to annualize that, it would mean 1,500 and plus murders in a year. That would give you a murder rate of about 56 per 100,000. We couldn't allow that to happen this year. It would have been worse this year. Why? Because this would be the first Christmas since we dispensed with the DRMA. You might be interested in knowing how many parties and events have been kept, how many applications have been put into the various municipalities for approval for parties, not to mention the unapproved ones. The pent-up desire to move around and be in packed commercial spaces. That would have created an opportunity. And indeed, we have seen them planning to rob businesses. You would note one which occurred in a rural part of Manchester, and then another in Porus, which resulted in significant loss of lives. There were plans to hijack goods in transit, which we know would have resulted in not just abductions, but in loss of lives. And we have intercepted and prevented many of those. You would have seen a few of them in which we have recovered. There were all kinds of scams going on, attracting people to sell cars or buy cars, and you know what would happen as a result of that. So there were all kinds of things we were picking up, and the government acted preemptively, but decisively, reasonably, lawfully to save lives. The SOEs, my friend, work.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
I'm Jamila from TVJ.
Thanks.
My question is to the PM again. The last time we were here, it was obvious that the government and the opposition had reached a stalemate as it relates to the terms of the SOE. Since then, has there been any discussion, in private, any attempt to have any discussions with the opposition about the SOE, what it would take for them to support? And are you concerned that the SOE has lost its shock value in both announcement and execution?
Jamila, thank you so much for those very important questions. Let me start with the shock value. By now, it would be apparent that it is not my intention to talk bad and to shock people into not doing illegal and criminal things. That is of no value to a criminal. If criminals believe that all you are doing is talking, they would never change their mode of operations. I'm done with that. The SOE, as I've said, is a legitimate tool that we will refine, and we will use it as sparingly as possible, but as effectively as possible within the law to save lives. So those people who hold out the SOEs for shock and awe are those who are still in the old mode of the SOE, that believe that somehow the government is eager to have these powers to deprive generally the citizenry of their rights. Nonsense. Our interest is only getting the criminals. So please, take that out of your mind about shock and awe. I point to you other jurisdictions that have had SOEs. Some of them have used it in far more draconian ways than we have. But they are not relying on shock and awe. It is a very effective tool. When France faced the threat of terrorism, they kept in place emergency powers for 2 years straight, approved by their parliament. When the United States faced 9/11, they passed the Patriot Act to give their government powers to respond to these emergencies. Why are we so afraid of ourselves to treat with the problems that are affecting us? So, again, I would wish to dismiss this argument about SOEs not having shock and awe, and that's not what we are interested in. The SOEs, you will recall, when they were first declared, were supported not just generally by the public, but also by the opposition. And I think I need to put that into context. Yes, the opposition voted for the extension of the SOEs. The SOEs were extended for several months. You recall? I think in your journalistic investigation, you should make that point. And that's a very profound point that the public should consider. Yes, it was supported. We weren't able to keep the SOEs for 6 months at a time without the support of the opposition in Parliament. You will recall that we only had 32 seats. How would we get the supermajority? And how would we have gotten the support in the Senate? It was supported. We had an agreement as well. You will recall that the former leader of the opposition and myself, we went at it in the competitive, robust political spirit. What good sense prevailed? The idea was that there should be a national consensus on crime, meaning we should take crime out of the contested political space and treat with crime as a national issue and have a national position on it. My view was that the supervising body of this national consensus should have been within the partnership framework. The leader of the opposition and others in the partnership felt that it could have been dealt with by establishing what has become a part of our democracy, a part of our governance, the establishment of oversight committees in the vein of EPOC. You recall EPOC, that very successful economic oversight committee for economic policy oversight? And so, in agreement, we created CMOC. Yes. How quickly we forget what CMOC was and how it came about. It is because there was a consensus. So CMOC was created. And in CMOC, there are some targets and agreements set. I recall it vividly. We had a well-staged event at the conference center where myself and the then leader of the opposition signed an agreement. No, it's an accord as to how we will operate. And whilst the agreement did not specifically mention states of public emergency, it described effectively what could be either the use of exceptional powers ranging from curfews to the establishment of quasi-judicial authority to oversee detentions. And what is the framework for the establishment of quasi-judicial authority to oversee detentions? It's called a state of public emergency. So there is a signed document which the current opposition ignores. Totally ignores. And says, based upon his principle, that is the leader of the opposition's principle, he believes SOEs are unconstitutional. And therefore, we have tried on several occasions to have consensus, and you would see that we significantly delayed in the implementation of any other SOEs after the change of the leadership in the opposition. The idea was that we were hoping that we could get some of the powers under the SOEs established in the new Enhanced Security Measures Act, particularly powers of detention. The then Attorney General, now Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, had meetings to discuss it, and it was roundly rejected. So you would understand how ecstatic I was when the leader of the opposition came out to give a glimmer of hope that, pre-charge detention. I want to be clear with that pre-charge detention, which is what we have always been discussing, mind you. This is what we've always been discussing. That pre-charge detention could be allowed in the spirit of getting consensus. I didn't bother to tackle him too much politically on it. If he wanted to claim it and have the newspaper say, oh, it's, brilliant idea. If it means consensus, fine. Only to hear recently that another member of the opposition, in co-leadership position actually, says, I am not convinced about this thing. I'm concerned about it. What am I to do? Wait until they make up their minds while people are dying? I can't. I have to act. So we have agreed, we've met with the churches, and the church has been a very reasonable voice, those who don't have on political blinders, in bringing the country and our leaders together. And I do intend to, again, once more, in early January, as we did last time, invite the leader of the opposition under the established umbrella of the Vale Royal talks. Maybe the church could host, the university hosted us, the church could host us and see if we can broker some understanding. All right, so I want the nation to understand. As Prime Minister, I'm also consensus builder in chief. So I'm not just the chief executive, meaning the chief person to get things executed, get things done. I also have a duty to be the chief consensus builder. And believe me, sometimes consensus is harder to build than to get things done. The longer you wait to build consensus, especially on matters where people hold, fundamental positions, you could squander a lot of time and resources whilst the ultimate objective is not achieved. And the ultimate objective is to save lives. And my friend, I thank you for the question. The proof of what we are doing, the Christmas pudding proof, is that last year we were at 127 murders. We are nowhere near there this year.
Nationwide News. This is the fourth SOE declaration in 6 months. What tangible benchmark will you use to determine when the routine use of this measure will no longer be necessary, or is it that you now see this measure as being regularized as a crime response? And I'll just ask the follow-up now. You spoke to targeting violence producers by separating them from the communities. Can you say across the last 3 SOEs how many people that were detained were charged with a crime, a serious crime? Sure.
So your last question, I will ask the Commissioner to give you the specifics. All right, so again, good question. And I will say, Ricardo, this government does what we call information surveillance. So we monitor quite a bit of what is said. And so the questions that you are asking, we see them come up in threads regularly. And what it says is that even though we have explained it before, that there are 2 things at play. One is that there are people who are of firm belief and will never change their perspectives. And then there are persons who the information has not reached them yet. So my presentation to you today is to reach the people who are open-minded, and hope that those people who are fixed in their perspective will see some sense in what I'm saying. Now, your question is, are we trying to make this a routine crime-fighting tool? And my answer to you is, as I've said it in many presentations in Parliament, we will use this tool as long as there is a threat to life and property and communities that are on so extensive a scale that it will deprive citizens of their rights and freedoms. And the situation is over and above the capacity of our regular law enforcement. That is the definition built into the Constitution of the state of public emergency. It doesn't have to be an exceptional situation that has happened, because you have emergency situations that reoccur. So if the conditions are there, as was the attempt was made in the CMOC agreement to say that if your murder rate, that is your murders per 100,000, exceed, Commissioner, remind me of the figure, I believe it was 30 per 100,000, then the use of SOEs and other tools that are over and above regular policing and law enforcement tools would be justified. That was the agreement signed in CMOC, and I encourage you, Ricardo, to get the CMOC agreement and read it. So yes, there is a benchmark that has been set, signed to by both political parties. So I just wanted to make that point absolutely clear. We should take out our mind that the SOEs are just, you have them in your back pocket and you never use them. They are situationally determined. Now, the appropriate question, Ricardo, is, and how I would have framed the question is, when will we reach the point that we don't need to use the SOEs? And now that is where the debate should be. How do we reach this point where we don't need to use powers over and above our normal policing powers? When? And we could have a big debate, but I could say a few things which we are doing to increase our capacity so we don't have to rely on SOEs. Well, one of the first things that we have done as this administration, which the public may not appreciate, but I have to say it. Before, in the last 30 years, we really never invested in our domain control. When you say Jamaica, Jamaica has a domain, an area that is sovereign to it. How do you control that? We had people illegally fishing in our waters, illegally trafficking guns and drugs and contraband and people in our waters, using Jamaica as a transshipment point, getting the gangs to secure the illegal transshipment, to corrupt the authorities so that they can pass through our ports. That has been going on for decades. Who has ever sought to say, let us stop it? We had one major attempt at that when we had Kingfish. We have had several partnerships with the United States and other countries to interdict vessels coming in. We had ship rider agreement. But Jamaica never really had the capacity unless it came from partnering with others. We have invested now in our domain control. Several offshore patrol vessels have been bought, and you're seeing the results. Protecting our natural assets, interdicting cocaine and other contraband coming into our space. We collaborate with intelligence, but our asset in the water. And that will take time to harden the domain so that people don't see Jamaica as a space where they can transship and then fund guns. Once that capacity is built, then the general level of criminality, of guns coming in, will be reduced. There are other areas in which we have to build domain control. We have to increase the number of detecting technology that we have at our ports. We have to harden our ports so that the agents of the state who work there are not complicit in bringing in contraband. And that is why we have now incorporated the Jamaica Customs as part of the National Security Council. They come to National Security Council every month and give us a report. They are part of the Get the Guns campaign. You will hear the advertisements on the radio. And we are actively integrating more technology and assets into that. These are quiet things. The public is not going to see that. Journalists don't report that. But I have to bring it out to say, yes, these are the things that increase our capacity. Another domain that Jamaica has, which people don't necessarily capture right away, it's not a physical domain, it's our cyber domain. And crime is moving into the cyber domain in a significant way, affecting our financial and communications infrastructure. And we are, again, investing in that. And many people quietly suffer from all kinds of scams and identity theft and money lost from their bank accounts and their cards, scam, all kinds of things. But we are building the capacity in that domain to protect our citizens. We are building the capacity in investigations. Jamaica now has one of the most modern forensic suites in the region. Commissioner and Minister of National Security can tell you more about that. We're building capacity. We have expanded the security forces. When we took over the security forces, the JDF was about, what, 4,000 CDS? Now, you are how much? What's your...
We're upwards of 12,000, approaching 13,000 by the end of this.
By the end of moving from?
11,000.
We're building capacity. All the more policemen that you're asking for. We're doing it. But it's not a switch that is flipped and immediately you're in a place of safety and security. It takes time. It does take time. So I want to assure you, sir, that government reliance on the state of public emergency is not singular. The government uses it with great discernment and when there is justification. And we are also very sensitive towards protecting the rights of the innocent. We don't want one innocent person to suffer because we are going after 100 criminals. So we have to act with great discernment. CP, the arrests.
Right. So, thanks, Ricardo. So the question, and there are a couple of things that have been said, let me just make a brief comment on. One is that we are routinely using this tool. This year, we've had so far 6 weeks out of 52 that have had a state of public emergency in it. We saw the trend. We had a brief period in June. And then we saw the trend continue up to, by the end of September, we were looking at 5 homicides a day, 5 murders a day. So apart from launching Operation Relentless 2, which is a suite of law enforcement responses supported by the military to the violence we are seeing a bit, we realized that we had to significantly drop the daily amount of Jamaicans who are being killed. In that effect, we asked for emergency powers for 2 weeks in November, an additional 2 weeks in December, and now we've asked for it from now going into the first part of next year. It's critical that we continue this downward trend of murders from where it was at 5 in September per day down to 2.5 where it is now and trending downwards. And it's important that we launch next year like this. So the powers that are given to us under the state of public emergency are on top of all of the other law enforcement things we do. So Operation Relentless continues. In certain spaces where violence is significant, we add in emergency powers on top of that. The combination of all of that gives us the results we need. So the question was how many of those people were charged. During the period of state of emergency, all of the people who are taken in, who have criminal files on them, or are wanted, persons of interest, persons who we know are involved in criminal activities, persons intercepted with firearms, etc., are not brought in under a state of emergency, even if they are existing in place. They are charged under the normal system. The state of emergency, on top of those guys, now allows us to impact the people who intelligence says doing violence. So these are the set that are in the communities, impacting it, but either they have served sentences already, they may be out on bail on a charge, or they may we may not have any evidence on them at that point, right? So you have a set of people who intelligence tells us are involved in criminal activities. And the intelligence comes from a suite of intelligence methodologies, information that comes in through different sources, and including the community itself, who identify people who are criminals among them, who they wish not to be there. It is the impact of those ones as well, and impact on them, that causes that reduction almost immediately once you put in a state of emergency. So the two things run in parallel. Once they can be charged, they're straight across to the normal system. As you realize, the state of emergency in its current form and in what's allowed at the moment, we'll get 14 days at max. Those trials and all of those charges are going to take far longer than that to be prosecuted. So we use this for immediate relief of communities, not just from actual murders, but from the fear of it. Because communities live in fear even when the statistics aren't changing, because there are people within the community who the community knows are violent, they're dangerous, they know they kill people, and sometimes they fire their weapons in these communities that are not hitting anyone, so it doesn't hit the statistics. But what it does is impact lives, impact the feeling of security, cause people to sleep on the ground rather than on their bed, and disrupts life in the community. It means the difference is between whether a taxi will take you into the community to drop you off, or they have to drop you off at the entrance and you walk in. These are real things that are impacting communities. It's not just, we just do this thing to, disrupt it. No, it's part of a suite of policing operations that we do. It allows us to do all of our other tasks as well, which is the public order stuff, and especially around this time. But most importantly, it impacts the communities with high violence directly in creating a safer environment for those people, one where they can enjoy this period like everybody else who are not in such violent communities. And as I say, our guys are out there. The presence will be maintained over the period. We'll continue to do what we need to do to make Jamaicans safe. Our reality as police officers is that we see every single one of those bodies in situ when they drop. So our perspective is very unique in terms of our responses and why we need the things we do. Any drop, anything that saves the lives of Jamaicans is worth it to be done to get the result we want.
Thank you, Commissioner, and look at that, it's 10 o'clock. You have more questions. I think we can take two more.
Very generous today.
It's Christmas, sir.
That's exactly
Prime Minister has to film his New Year's message, so he won't be here much longer. So you may go ahead. 2 last questions.
Day visit to Washington. Can we get an update on what occurred, the conclusions of that, and the way forward? Also, Commissioner, could we get the murder figure as at today?
A part of our crime fighting strategy is not just to target Jamaicans in Jamaica who are the masterminds or the ones actually committing the crime, but because we have such a well-connected society internationally, and we have a large diaspora, it is important that we build these very robust international crime-fighting partnerships to enable us to take advantage of treaties that exist, laws in other countries that exist, to target the criminals overseas. Well, we have not necessarily done it in a targeted way, in a structured way before, and the partnerships have usually been our partners utilizing our laws here to interdict criminals in which they have an interest. What we have said is that we need to utilize these existing partnerships to be able to interdict criminals in foreign countries. The Commissioner said it very well in our meeting with the Justice Department and the FBI and several other law enforcement agencies that were there. And if I may quote you, Commissioner, my recollection of your statement, which I thought was quite profound, is that we must show the criminals that their criminal links are not stronger than our government and diplomatic links. And I think that is very important for criminals to understand that Jamaica does have very strong and well-respected political, diplomatic links, and we have legal treaties and frameworks in which we can interdict and prosecute them in foreign jurisdictions. So that is the essence of the strategy. We provided the agencies and entities with a list of names that we have been tracking here, which we have certain intelligence on, not just intelligence, but I won't go further. And the entities are doing their work. I don't know if Commissioner is inclined to go further than I have gone. We don't want to say too much, but you will see the efforts you will see the results of our efforts very shortly.
Okay, so you had asked about, so I'll give you a couple of figures. To date, as of today, we are 1,481 for the year. It is 1.23% above last year. As I say, we're coming down from 8.9% 3 months ago. So we've managed to do quite a bit. We know yesterday we had none. And so there have been, in that period, particularly during when we had declared the state of emergency, there were a number of 0 days, which of course is a significant relief even to our investigators who are not getting another file, but just a relief to the country in general when we get a day like that. This month we are tracking probably around 50% of what it was last year for December. We have just over 50% of where we were this point in December last year. So we've recovered 50% of this year.
How many lives that worked out?
That's about 50 plus lives just for December. Yeah. So.
And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you all. It's a wonderful It's the most wonderful time of the year. That is not what we're here to discuss today. That's in the premature of the Prime Minister alone. But I really want to thank you all for coming out to our probably our last press conference for the year. And I want to wish you all a very prosperous new year and to all be safe and to enjoy time with your family and friends. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year.
Jamaicans, look on the murder rate. You think that normal? We need to get every illegal gun and